M&A TV is very pleased right now to be joined by Warwick Smith, who is a managing partner of global public policy at Instinctif. Thank you, Warwick, so much for joining us.
That's a pleasure.
Tell us a little bit about your company and the name. I know that goes way back.
Yeah, so we're an international consulting company. We provide a range of services, be it financial communications, corporate engagement, and I run the public policy practice, which is a government relations and public affairs practice, primarily based in Europe, but also doing some work in the US and the Far East and South Africa. And the name was created because someone came up with the idea of what we were advising clients would be their instinct if only they knew the facts.
That makes so much sense.
So that's us.
Well, today you were part of a panel on Brexit and the situation in the UK. But before we get to all of that, let's talk about the election in the United States and Donald Trump being elected president and potential policy changes. I mean, you've got your finger on the pulse of laws. So tell us what you think about that, what you foresee.
So first of all, for me, it was deja vu. I got into New York at 11 o'clock last night. I turned on CNN, and at 2 o'clock, I realized that it wasn't quite the result that we were expecting, just as I did with the EU referendum in the UK a few months back. I think one of the differences that we've seen so far, and we're only a few hours in, is that the noises coming out of the President-elect's camp have been more conciliatory than we're actually seeing in the UK in the Brexit camps, who still seem to be fighting the campaigns between Remain and Leave, and there's a total lack of grace between the two sides now the decision is taken. I think what we will look for from a Trump presidency is how outward-looking and inclusive can he be given the commitments that he has made during the campaign. And as one of my colleagues was saying from a platform this morning, you know, the man who stood for president was a different man who stood for the nomination. How can he square that? So can he be outward looking and yet deliver to those disaffected people who frankly elected him into office?
It all remains to be seen. So much uncertainty, you know, with Brexit and here in the United States right now. So since Brexit was approved back in June, what has been the reality as far as business transactions in the UK?
Yeah, so I think we've seen people putting things on hold. We've seen a few IPOs cancelled, a couple of M&A deals held up, but it's not been the edge of a cliff. Things haven't just stopped, so there's been a little bit of a holding back. Maybe the deals have been smaller, not quite as many, but not the fundamental impact that you might have expected on the deal front. What we have seen, of course, is a significant drop in the value of the pound against the dollar and the euro, as I can tell from my hotel rates here.
So if I can ask you personally what your opinion was on Brexit and what you think long-term consequences might be.
Okay, so long-term, I think the UK, we're still, I think, just the fifth biggest economy in the world, though that might slide soon. We'll be fine. I think in the long term, you'll still see a robust economy. You'll see a different economy. I think the issue for the UK people is how we go from a strong economy within a big trading bloc to one outside a big trading bloc. And that all depends on the deal that the Prime Minister can do with the European Union.
And the Prime Minister is still saying, if I'm correct, that talks will begin in late March?
Absolutely. So there's this piece in the European Union Treaty that says if you want to leave, you have to give nomination under Article 50, and there's then 2 years in which to negotiate the terms of your leaving. Not as some people think, that the terms which apply after you've left, but it's how you leave rather than the deal that's struck after that.
Right, and so that alone is 2 years out. So what's the process beyond that?
It could be anything. So it depends. It is perfectly feasible for that, in that 2-year negotiation, for both sides to agree that they'll continue to apply the same provisions as it is now and give themselves another period of, say, 3, 4, 5 years in which to do a better deal. Or it's equally possible they say we can't agree anything and the UK is out on its own. So the uncertainty is very significant. It could be shorter and total uncertainty, or it could be longer and a little less uncertain.
What would you say the investment opportunities for M&A are as far as investors within the UK looking out globally and vice versa?
Yeah. So I think one of the things we've seen today is President-elect Trump saying that the UK will go to the top of the list for free trade agreements, whereas President Obama was saying the bottom of the list. You've seen the Prime Minister in India this week, though paradoxically it was the UK that stopped the EU doing a free trade agreement with India. Looking perhaps to some of our older partners in the world, I think it really does depend on how attractive a deal we can do. I think the other thing that people have not quite cottoned onto with Theresa May's premiership, on the day she took office, she spoke about creating a new industrial strategy. Now, it may be a little strange, but the UK hasn't had an industrial strategy for a couple of decades now. So she's looking as well to how she can bolster British competitiveness and its industrial performance outside of the EU. So for businesses, yes, there are opportunities out of uncertainty as well as risks, and maybe the brave will end up in a good place or a bad place, but I think that those opportunities exist. There's another opportunity for business in helping to define that environment after Brexit has fully taken effect.
Well, I'd like to thank you so much. You've given us a lot to think about, a lot of great insight on the world economy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.